Hello and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to have a lot of fun today, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to take off over to Costa Rica, stop for a quick visit with my buddy Craig Sutton, who is on top of what's happening in Paradise. Holy smokes, they've been catching a lot of fish over there. Almost unheard of numbers of sailfish and plenty of marlin and big dolphin. Then we're going to go to Florida. We're going to start up in the Northeast with Captain David Voorhees. I want to drill down with him on how he's catching what he's catching. In fact, that's going to kind of be the theme tonight. We're going to educate guys on how they can catch more fish in their area right now. Hey, tonight's podcast is brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people back to nature. By DOA Lures, they're the unfair advantage. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. It's time to get rolling, so let's take off to Costa Rica. You know what? We're going to lower our landing gear, make a quick stop here at the airport, and see what our buddy Craig's got for us. Well, what do you know? We land in Nosara, and here comes our buddy Craig Sutton with a couple of cool pina coladas for us. Craig, tell me about the fishing.
Been wide open, brother. We had big pot of sailfish with some mahi mixed in, nice yellowfin mixed in. They're a little far offshore for us, but this time of year in March, the offshore winds in the morning kind of get the good water off the beach a little bit, but big bites of fish. We had a boat, I think I told you last weekend, we had one earlier last week, get 153 sailfish in one day.
That's unheard of, Craig. Now you guys, well, people don't understand it. They hear the name Nosara and they don't understand where you're located. You guys are located to a place that's a whole lot more famous than what Nosara is down at Los Sueños, aren't you?
Yep. And pretty much, now, of course, there's a few local boats been fishing that far offshore with us, but every day we're out there, there's, between 20, 25, world-class boats from Los Sueños. They're running the 60 miles up to our fishery and then running back every day. But, and that 150-something sailfish is kind of a ridiculous number if you ask me, but they're doing the snatch release, and I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but that's not what we do. It skews our numbers a little bit, but we bring them in and, revive them the right way and let them settle down, release them where they know they're not, we get the hook out of their mouth and they're healthy, wealthy, and ready to go.
Craig, we don't need to talk about my love affair with sailfish, but to me, numbers take away from the experience. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
Give me that picture. Now, we're not pulling fish on the boat, and I want people to understand that. Nowhere are they any longer pulling sailfish aboard to take their pictures, but your guys are so good at that in-the-water picture with the angler and his wife or his girlfriend, whatever. Give me that picture on the wall instead of me being able to go over and say, I caught 150. I'd rather have 15 that we really, really enjoy. The tackles match to them in the fight. You're not backing down to try and grab the leader in 10 seconds and pop the fish off. Stop all that. Let's enjoy the experience of catching billfish.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Ricky. Couldn't agree more, and that's the way we do it too. It's just, we're old school, but we're conserving the resource, and that's the way to do it.
Well, I know we caught marlin and sailfish down there with you. If you remember, Craig, oh my gosh, what an experience for him, Frank Wilhelm with Yamaha. And it's not like okay, Frank, you got him on here. Get the leader. Okay, congratulations, Frank, you caught a sailfish. I know we're not doing that. We want to watch that fish jump.
No, yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more, man.
That's some great weather and some great year-round fishing. Craigie, we appreciate it so much. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
904-591-2161 and the blog at fishingnosara.com. It's up to date.
All right, Craigie, we appreciate it. We'll check in with you next week. Keep them biting.
Thank you, Ricky.
You got it. Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing. Let's hit Florida. I know Captain David Voorhees up in the Northeast. I got some questions for that boy. He's catching a lot of fish, and I want to know how. Now we get to go back home. We're in my hometown, Jacksonville, Florida, where the best inshore fisherman I know is Captain David Voorhees. David, how are you?
Hey, Captain Ricky, I'm doing great, buddy.
Good deal. Tell me how spring's going for you.
Man, I tell you what, everything just is going off. The fishing, it's just amazing how quick these fish have turned on. You know, we talk about water temperature so much up here in the northeast part of Florida, and it really does matter inshore. We passed that magic number of 65 degrees, and it was like somebody turned a light switch on, Rick. And I'm not just talking about redfish, but I'm talking about a lot of different species. The sea trout were biting better this week. Flounder, my God, the flounder showed up, and we've been catching at least anywhere from 7 to 10 flounders a trip. And Rick, you know, I'm not even trying to catch these flounders. It's purely, you know, just a bycatch for fishing for the reds. I end up catching these flounders. Plenty of yellowmouth trout. They're on a spawn right now. They're going to spawn really heavy on this next moon. And also inshore, they've been seeing a lot of good numbers of whiting. And, you know, these whiting, it's really funny because I tell people we catch these whiting inshore. Now, in the surf, they've been really going off. But inshore, I have found certain locations that are notorious for holding whiting. And they're not going to be everywhere, but when you find these spots, you could go back year in and year out, and you're going to find whiting in these locations. And the only way I have figured this out, Rick, was my deep water jigging that I've been doing. And that's how I have found some of these whiting.
David, I look forward all week to talking to you because I keep meaning to drill down on that a little bit with you. You are one of the only people I know that specializes in fishing the main channel of the intercoastal. Everybody runs as far up a creek as they can, and you are fishing sometimes 12, 15, 20 feet of water. Why are you able to do that? I'm assuming you're fishing braid and jig heads. Is that right?
Exactly. I'm fishing my braided line, medium to heavy action rods. I don't want a real flimsy rod because, you know, you got to really set hard on these fish. And this week we saw quite a few, almost every charter this week, we managed to see a redfish over 30 pounds.
Wow.
And I tell people, you know, I tell people when we're doing this, try to get vertical as quick as you can. Everybody wants to cast, and casting and deep water jigging do not go together. You almost got to drive. It's like going offshore, Rick, and bottom bumping. You know, you don't want to cast.
You don't want to cast, yep.
No, you want to drop straight down. These fish are not going to spook 20 feet below your boat. Another thing is, use your depth finder to look at these ledges, and I'm always looking for really sharp edges. I don't like these gradual taping holes, you know, gradual drop-off. I like a good steep drop-off. In other words, basically like a cliff. And those are the things I have found these fish like to hug against those straight edges. I discovered this many years ago fishing for stripers and other fish in dams that they tend to hug these concrete walls, these straight walls. These fish will absolutely hug them. And it's because the bait is actually swimming along these walls. And that's, I think, is what they're doing. They're picking off these bait because you really want to drop your lure or your jig right up against these drop-offs.
Okay, and your idea is just stay in touch with your bait when you get it down on the bottom of that deep?
Absolutely. You cannot have an iota bit of slack in your line. You have to maintain a tight line. And a lot of times you are going to get hit on the way down. 9 out of 10 times, most people don't feel that hit when it's going down. It's very difficult. And a lot of times people they make the mistake of they wanting to cast. But again, I go back to just try to get them to get back to vertical so we can get that good straight tight line so you can feel those thumps.
Okay.
And,
okay, real quick, I'm guessing we're talking, 20-pound braid?
I like to use 20-pound braid, Rick, and I top it off with a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. I call it 20-20, and I use just nothing but a 1/4 ounce jig head. I tried to go heavier, and sometimes I found that the heavier the jig doesn't give the live bait a natural presentation. So I like to go with that 1/4 ounce jig head, and that's going to give either your mud minnow or your shrimp a more lively presentation.
Perfect. Yep. David, that's a
Yep.
great report, and now's the time for it to start. As you've reported, it's already started. Will it go on all summer now?
I believe so. I like to do this in the wintertime. I feel these fish like to go deep, and the other time I'm successful with this is in the summertime when the water really gets hot up on the flats. These fish will find that cooler water down deep, and we're now, Rick, starting to see a really good population of oversized reds that I think are staying with us inshore year round. And I'm talking 33 to 35-inch reds. And we've been catching them all year long. And I think they just stay here. I don't think, these are the fish that are getting ready to head out to spawn, getting ready to hook up with the big reds in the St. Johns River. And we've got a real good population of redfish in the 30, 34, 35-inch range.
Fantastic. David, thank you so much. Please tell me we can check in with you again next week.
Absolutely, and I guarantee the fishing report is going to be on fire.
I like your optimism. Thank you, buddy.
All right, Rick, we'll see you. Tight lines.
Our thanks to Captain David Voorhees for a great Northeast Florida report. Now, let's hop on down to East Central and check in with my favorite East Central guy, Captain Jim Ross. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rick. How are you doing?
Outstanding, my boy. I tell you what, it's trying to back off the wind a little bit and trying to warm up. Tell me about your fishing. How's it been?
So the water along the beaches and offshore is kind of dirty right now. But I tell you what, the fish at the inlets right now haven't really been fazed by it at Canaveral and at Sebastian. Now, Ponce is a little different story. Ponce's temperature dropped 8 degrees since last Friday because of that north wind and bringing that colder and dirtier water in. I got a real good report from a captain friend of mine there just minutes ago, and said it was a little bit of a struggle for those guys. But when you have that kind of a change and the water gets really dirty, those things are, that's to be anticipated. But at Canaveral and at Sebastian, the water's still clean enough. The fish are happy. There's redfish, there's black drum, and there are snook all around those jetties right now. And you guys and gals get out there, you want to try and hit, live bait. If you're fishing daytime, live bait is absolutely key. What kind of live bait, you ask? Well, glad you did. Croakers are working really well. Live greenies and live pilchards are also working very well right now at Canaveral and at Sebastian.
Jim, I got a question for you. So many people, they get their boat and they want to go fish the jetties. It doesn't matter if it's Jacksonville Inlet, it's Sebastian, it's Canaveral, all of those. And I think the jetties are one of those places where 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish. Give me a key as to when to be at the jetties, at the mouth of these inlets, to catch fish.
Okay. So from a boater standpoint, you can fish just about any part of the tide. What you need to do is you need to go along the jetty and find where the fish are sitting during that particular part of the tide. That's the key thing. You can fish the jetty one day and it's high tide, and you go back the next day and it's mid tide and you don't catch the same number of fish, and you go back the next day and it's low tide and you don't catch anything at all. And you're saying, well, how come I just fished here the other day and they were biting like crazy, and today I come out here and we got skunked? It's because the fish move in relationship to the tide where they want to stay on the jetty. They want to stay in a place where there's a little bit of an eddy or some kind of a lee that they can get in. They don't want to be in full current if they can at all help it. So you want to find, where is the current, let's say on an incoming tide, where is the current the least where they can sit there and wait for something to come by and run out, maybe even on a current scene where they run out into that heavier current, grab a bait to eat, and then come back into that lighter current. They're lazy. They don't want to fight current. So that's the one thing that you need to find out is, where are they along the jetty during the stage of the tide that you're fishing on? And that does change throughout the year, and it also changes with the type of baits that are transitioning through there the most. So that's a little bit of a learning curve, but that's a little bit of, you guys get to do your homework on that one, on your particular jetty. Now, at Canaveral as an example, I fished Canaveral for the past couple of weeks. I have not been to Sebastian at all. The fish at Canaveral have been biting on the change of the tides, and they have been biting typically on the outgoing tide better than they have on the incoming tide for the last 2 weeks. And I think to myself, okay, why is that? Because you typically have cleaner water coming in on the incoming tide than you do on the outgoing tide. Well, the reason is the greenies and the pilchards are bunching up in the inlet on the outgoing tide. And the greenies and the pilchards and the bumper and the little leatherbacks and the little baby jack crevalles and all of those little things, they're feeding on these little glass minnows that are being flushed out of the port during that outgoing tide. And they're and Spanish mackerel as well. And they're staging all around the mouth of that inlet during that outgoing tide. On the incoming tide, those bait fish are all getting flushed all into the back of the port or swimming into the back of the port. And so the fish are still sitting out at the jetties, but they're not feeding at that time because they're the type of bait, when you look at the pilchards and the greenies feeding on these little micro minnows, and then the snook feeding on the greenies and pilchards that are feeding on the micro minnows, that's that whole circle of life thing. You saw The Lion King, so you can understand that. But that's the key. It starts with the smallest part in the spectrum and goes from there. So the glass minnows are feeding on the plankton. The greenies, pilchards, Spanish jacks, everything else is feeding on the minnows, and the snook and the redfish are feeding on those fish.
So what you're looking for is a tidal condition where the tide is over the structure. The tide brings the bait near the structure that the fish are hanging in to get out of the current. For example, if you've got a big boulder in a rising tide, the fish are probably going to be behind that boulder on the downside of the current, and then that would be reversed on a falling tide. Is that right?
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Jim, that's something that can help guys catch more fish at the jetties, and we appreciate it so much. Thanks, and please tell me we can check in with you next week.
I look forward to it.
Our thanks to Captain Jim Ross for a great East Central report. Now we're going to hop down to the mayor of South Beach, Alan Sherman, and find out what's going on offshore Miami. Alan, are you with us?
I am here, Rick, and it is hopping in South Beach for sure.
Do I understand you're fishing right now?
I am on the water right now. We have caught 2 Spanish mackerel, maybe a dozen trout up to 20 inches, some ladyfish, and we just released 3 snook, and we've missed about 5 of them.
Oh, good deal. That's activity. That's outstanding. Is that how it's been? Has it been good ever since the blow let up a little?
Yeah, much better for sure. And all of this fishing has been done mostly with live bait fish, pilchards, and that's been a big key. We were able to catch some pilchards today, which we haven't been able to do much in the past few days with all the wind and dirty water. But the offshore guys are doing well out there today. I've been listening to them on the radio. They're steadily catching kingfish, anywhere from 80 to 200 feet of water. One guy reported a yellowfin tuna, large, free jump just behind his boat. Unfortunately, he was bottom fishing. He didn't have a bait out to fish for that fish. I guess they had some chum in the water. It must have brought in some smaller, bait fish, and the elephant took advantage of it, but they did not hook up on that fish. There's been scattered mahi out there, mostly being caught by the guys fishing kite baits for sailfish, and there are sailfish out there as well. And most of them are being caught in the same depth. Blackfin tunas, when we've had some cloudy skies, which we have right now, the blackfin tunas have been biting pretty good. And then they're biting mostly over the artificial reefs, say 200 feet, 300 feet of water. But, if you've got a live well full of chum, pilchards, and you work those baits, they'll come up. I'm just pointing the fish to my angler at the front. Get that fish. He just popped the bait. We haven't got them yet, but I think we're going to get them shortly. And, that fishery's been pretty good. The guys bottom fishing yesterday over the deeper ledges, 100 feet, 120 feet, the shallower wrecks, they had some really nice mutton snappers and vermilion snappers as well. So we've got fish biting. You get some live bait fish and get out there on the reef, and it's happening.
Oh, that's really good. Alan, let me ask you a question. You report so often on peacock bass, and I hate to be so ignorant about that. I've only caught a few in Venezuela. I've never fished for them in Florida. How are the guys catching those?
All right, so the ones we catch here are a smaller version of the ones you targeted in Venezuela. A big fish here is about 7 pounds.
That's a good fish.
But this year, there's been like an explosion of them. Not as many largemouth in the areas we fish for largemouth, but they've been replaced by peacock bass in big numbers. It's not uncommon right now to catch 50, 60 or more.
Wow.
In a day. Yeah, it's been quite impressive. But as far as how they catch them, if you're, I don't want to say lazy, but if you don't like throwing artificials, a shiner will get them one after another. And all you need to do is put that bait under a float with a small hook, and you'll go through dozens of them without any trouble. Dozens of shiners, and they sell them at the local freshwater bait shops around the canals. But most of the guys are throwing artificial lures, and they're hard plastics, some soft plastics, but anything that's got a lip and dives a couple of feet below the surface, floaters that dive once you start retrieving them, they're whacking them. Some of the guys are throwing surface plugs made by Hedden, and hey, you're on.
I love getting the play-by-play, Alan. I love getting the play-by-play.
We missed them.
Okay, all right. So it sounds like good old Rapala country to me.
It is great, and we've been using a Rapala floating minnow. Actually, it's not a floating minnow, an X-Rap. And of all things, it's like the rainbow trout colors. It's got little speckles all over it. It's like the last lure I would usually think that freshwater fish down here in South Florida would eat. But the largemouth like them, and the peacocks are jumping on them.
I'll be darned. How are the peacocks on the table? Can you eat them?
I don't think people eat them down here. I think there's some edibility to them. I've never tried it. None of my customers have that I know of. But, I don't see why they wouldn't be edible. When you were in Venezuela, they must eat them there, right?
Oh, yeah. But that's a different scale of edibility, if you will. They eat what they can catch there. Alan, that's a great report, and I'm so glad to hear things picking up for you. Let me let you get back to your people, and please tell me we can check with you next week.
I look forward to it.
Thanks, buddy. Captain Alan Sherman, the mayor of South Beach, checking in with a great report and a little info about how to peacock bass fish. It's time to go to Kokomo, all the way down to Alamorada, sit under the tiki hut and have a cool one with my buddy Nick Stancic. Nick, how are you?
We're hanging in, Rick.
That's a good thing. I know being a new father, hanging in's about all you can do. How's your fishing been? Have you fished this week?
Yep, we got out 4 trips, and we caught some great fish, but we also suffered heartbreak, and we've been battling fish depression since then.
Fish depression. Oh, no, not fish depression. What happened?
Well, the first trip we caught a 297-pounder. So
that's
a real nice fish.
That's a sweetie.
The next day I'm out there, and we hooked Godzilla. We had him on the wind on 10 times. Took us 16 miles up to Largo.
What?
7 hours we were on this fish. He jumped once. We could only see the splash. Every time we got him close, he raced away. 7 hours, I said, it's starting to get dark. We're going to have to pull on him. And we had him 5 feet from the wind on, and the braid let go. And it was a quiet ride home. It was the one I've been fishing for the last 15 years. I've done battle with a couple of giants, a couple of them, but this one was a tough one to swallow.
Oh. And just to put that in context, how big was the one you recently caught? The real big one.
Well, 2 years ago we caught that 757, and I didn't get a good look at this fish. I could only see him one time and see his flash. And I don't know if it was 500 or 600, if it was 700 or 800. You start talking, 8 or 10 inches in length and a few inches in girth, a couple 100 pounds, and that one was tough. But we got back on the horse the next day. We went 3 for 3. Tagged and released a couple up to 100 pounds, kept one for dinner, and then the following day we had one bite about a 255 pounder.
Ooh.
So we had some good fish. Just the one big one was a tough one to sleep that night.
That's how they get so big, Nick. But you're right. It does give us fish depression when it happens. I'm so sorry to hear that. Nick, there's sword fishing going on all up and down the coast, and people are starting to get into it. What on earth do you look for when you're getting ready to set up?
So looking for swordfish. The shallow side I would say is 1,300 to 1,400 feet off the coast of Florida. The deeper side, 1,900 to 2,000. But if you just took the average of 1,500 to 1,800 feet up and down the entire coast, that's where they're migrating through a good portion of them anyhow. And any sort of bottom relief or structure is a good area to fish. But we also do catch them on flat bottom because they do got to swim from point A to point B.
Boy, I tell you what, that's something. It is our best big game fishing, really, if people learn to do it right, isn't it?
At the end, there's not really another fish you can target with the consistency offshore to catch them. We catch a few marlin out here, but to have a chance to hook a 200, 300, 400 pound fish any given day, the swordfish would be your best shot. You have to want to try to catch them like that.
I'm with you. Real quickly, before we let you go, has there been any more bluefin tuna sighting around Islamorada?
Nah, I haven't heard of anything the last few days. There's been a few sailfish caught, a few African pompanos, a few mutton snapper, a few dolphins, so a little bit of everything. It's a little up and down. A few days are better than others, but there has been some action on the reef. So.
Good deal. Nick, thanks so much. I'll let you get back to your baby girl, and we'll talk with you next week if that's okay.
Sounds good, Rick. Have a good one.
Captain Nick Stancic, suffering the heartbreak of a 7-hour battle. Been there, done that, got that T-shirt, don't want it again. Our thanks to Nick for his great report. Nick and all of our action spotters are brought to you every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature back together. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrid boats? Check out youngboats.com. Now, let's go to 10,000 Islands and check in with the mayor of all the islands, Captain Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rick. How about you?
I'm doing okay, buddy. Tell me what's going on in 10,000 Islands.
It's pretty good. We this past week, earlier in the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish, we had a little bit of inclement weather, some overcast skies, some windier conditions, but now we're kind of settling in. The weekend looks fantastic that's ahead of us. We'll see if the weather holds, but water temperature's kind of stabilized in the backcountry, and that's kind of where we've with all the wind, we've kind of found our way back into the backcountry, and boy, has it really been special. The snook have been biting really good. We're not getting big fish, but boy, the numbers are certainly there, and we're getting a bunch of different, sized redfish, some overslot and fish in the slot, and even some juvenile fish. So the action's been pretty good.
Steve, on the redfish, how do you guys fish them down there? Is it primarily a soak your bait on the bottom fishery? You jigging, throwing topwaters? What are you doing?
It's a little bit of everything. I would say if there's two mainstays in our area, it's certainly pilchard. You can throw them on a cork or free line around, select hard bottom structure, like shoals and, oyster bars, things like that. And that generally works a little bit better on the lower tides for us. And the higher tides are obviously up in the mangroves. So understanding what mangroves, certainly hold them is best. But I got to tell you, probably the funnest thing that we do is about as simple as it gets. If you've ever saltwater fish whatsoever in the state of Florida, you've inevitably thrown a bucktail jig. And The tried and true down by us is, natural colored hues, tan, browns, copper even, things, gold, stuff like that. Shows up very good in that darker tannic water. And the key is really just, we go a little bit bigger. You can certainly throw the quarter-ounce stuff, but the 3/8 ounce is kind of the tried and true. You want kind of like a Arky-style jig head or a boxing glove, I call them. They look like a boxing glove turned upside down.
Right.
And you want to tip that with just a thumbnail piece of shrimp. I see so many people put a big shrimp on there, and it just absolutely affects the action of the jig if you don't use a small enough piece. And trust me, you can catch 35-inch redfish on a 3/8 ounce bucktail jig with a thumbnail-sized piece of shrimp. It's more just for the scent than anything, because you're moving this a little bit quicker. On cold fronts, you want to kind of crawl it a little bit, but the normal rhythm and cadence is kind of a cast it out. That 3/8 ounce is going to allow you to bomb, some casts, and let it get to the bottom. Then it's a hop, hop, pause, hop, hop, pause, and 9 out of 10 times that cadence on the drop or the pause, it's where you're going to get. So when you rear back for your next hop, if you will, you're going to feel the load of the fish, the weight of the fish, and then you're on. So that's a tried and true. I mean, we catch trout doing that. They'll catch everything that swims down in the 10,000 ounce. So right now, the redfish, if you're a savvy caster and can kind of read some water, that's the route to go. Get that thing down. They're still kind of, they're definitely near the bottom, and it's shallow water anyway. But that's the reality is that 3/8 ounce bucktail jig with a thumbnail-sized piece of shrimp.
Now, is it important to you if the shrimp is fresh, or will frozen shrimp get the same effect?
Yeah, I think you start to run into that catfish mode once you start using stuff that's not 100% fresh. So what I do is I get my fresh shrimp in the morning. I pre-cut everything. So I'll pre-cut little thumbnail size. You don't need a ton of them, maybe a couple dozen. And that's it. I throw them in like a Ziploc, throw them on ice, and I've got them for the rest of the day. So, a couple minutes in the morning, just with some good scissors, pre-cut all that stuff, and you're ready to go. That way you're not messing around with it throughout the day.
That's perfect. Now, real quickly, because we've really gone a little bit longer on this, but it's just so interesting. When you say if you know where to fish, are you fishing around mangroves? What are you fishing around to do that?
Yeah, it's all tide dependent, to be honest with you. The higher tide stages, those fish are going to push up into the mangroves. In our area, obviously, that can be, a labyrinth of places to go. But you really want to concentrate on stuff that might have some deeper banks to it. So look at your charts, look at Google Earth. That's a good indicator. And then on the lower tide stages, you want to find those hard bottom areas adjacent to those areas. So they're going to pull out with the tide, set up on those, rocky shoals, oyster bars, things of that avail. They're not going far. They're just following the tide. So you got to follow it with them. So that's really kind of our pattern. It's really kind of in there.
Oh, Steve, that was so helpful. Thank you so much. I now feel like I could go to 10,000 Islands and catch a redfish. Thank you, Cap. Please tell me we can talk to you next week.
Oh, for sure, Rick. Can't wait.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Captain Steve Dahl. Our thanks to Captain Steve Dahl for a great 10,000 Islands report. Now we're going to come around to Southwest Florida and check in with Snook Stamp Charters Captain Greg Stamper. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Rick. Very busy.
I don't know if you've looked at your calendar or not, but it's springtime, Cap. We don't have to fight winter anymore.
Well, I hope so. I mean, you never know. We might get something that creeps up on us down the line, but I'm pretty sure that moving forward, we're in that pattern, and things are going to be getting a lot warmer, and the temperatures of the water are going to start jumping up, and we've already got the bait here, so it's good to go. I'm ready for it.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready too. What's been going on in your area lately?
All right. Well, I got to tell you, there's one really awesome site, which we were just talking about spring. The permit bite has been outstanding. Anybody who's been out there on those wrecks and those reefs, we're talking about stuff that's within 5 miles maybe even out to about 10. They're not going out much further than that. And they're just wrecking permit right now. It's like one after another. And the fish aren't small. I saw one fish that came in today that was 23 pounds. And I'm surprised they kept it. But I guess guy wanted a trophy or some sort of mount or something. Most of those fish they keep are just small ones that are like 10 or 12 pounds. The cobia for them has been their bycatch, so they're doing very well out there. But moving in to my neck of the woods, the tarpon are starting to come from the south. I was out just today alone, and I had some guys that just wanted to go shark fishing. He had 2 little kids that were 10, 12 years old. They wanted to catch something big. So I was like, all right, let's go catch some ladyfish. We did catch some other stuff as side catch. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But the cool part was we're out there tarpon fishing with cut ladyfish. And about every 30 minutes, Rick, I saw that one tarpon roll. So they're here. They're going to start getting thicker and thicker. And I'm going to tell you in 2 to 3 weeks, it is on. Now, the cool part, Rick, is we were fishing for our ladyfish, and the unfortunate thing for these guys is we started catching mackerel in between ladyfish, and then we started blowing up some pompano. We got some nice pompano today, and I even told them, I said, hey, if you want to eat something, we need to put these boys in the box.
I'm telling you do. Listen, how do you search for pompano in your area? And I hear you talk quite a bit about skipping pompano.
Okay, so we have some of our normal areas that we will fish for them where they should be. Now, when I talk about skipping pompano, here's something that anybody who's listening from all over the U.S. will relate to. They have these Asian carp all over the north that are invading their waterways. Of course, we don't have those down here, but it's a pitch of the motor. So there's a certain motor pitch and a speed that these fish will actually skip out of the water. Now, I don't know if it's always the pitch of the motor or just the fact that when you start to roll over or they see the boat shadow or they see the boat itself, they skip. They skip a lot like what a sailfish does when he tail walks.
Mm-hmm.
They skip 3, 4, 5, 6 times and then they go back in the water. So a lot of times when I'm idling around or just barely throwing a wake, almost like you're in a no-wake zone, basically that's the speed I'm moving at where I'm in the back bays and some of the backcountry areas or even in our passes, all of a sudden pompano just start to skip across the water. So if you see that, you know they're there, and then you can put your time into those areas. Other than that, we just search for them a lot of times with our jigs that are tipped with shrimp in areas they should be. But when you start skipping pompano like we do down here, it's pretty much game on. It's going to be how many people are you trying to feed? Let's go.
So when you skip one, and he comes out almost like a rock skipping off of your wake, right? Is that kind of like throwing a rock?
Exactly like you found yourself a nice 2.5-inch rock that's really flat,
right? Yeah,
skinny, but really 2.5 inches. You could skip that thing 5, 6, 7 times. He'll skip sometimes 10, 15, 20 yards before he goes back in the water.
I'll be darned.
Sideways, almost like a triple tail does. He'll skip, 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 and when you see that and you're in the right area where you think they should be, you're like, all right, game on, let's do this.
Then you shut it down and fish them how?
Depending on the current. If it's a good place where I can slide through on my boat drifting, I will. Now, sometimes they get stacked up where you skip them in certain spots, but then I will actually power pull down. I will take small pieces of shrimp, chum a little bit. So little tiny pieces, I break them up, I let them slowly go out with the current, and those fish will just kind of gather up in one spot, and we can just wreck them. We'll do it one day, you and me.
Yep, fish them on a piece of shrimp with a jig, tip jig, what?
I like a 1/4 ounce jig with just a tip of shrimp on it. And if I have people who can't cast well, I might go heavier, but then you have to worry about them getting stuck on the bottom. You got to keep that thing moving through the water column. Those fish aren't just sitting on the bottom. You got to keep it going. If you feel them hit it, I tell all my clients, if you feel them hit it, don't stop doing what you're doing. Your jigging alone will hook those fish. But if you stop, that jig will just fall to the bottom. And Rick, there ain't no fish out there that's going to go after something that just falls to the bottom because they're going to know something's up.
Mm-hmm.
This bait should be running away from me like it's crazy, and that's when they get smart. So I use jigs, I tip them with shrimp, and that's how we roll down here in Southwest Florida.
Perfect. Great report. Thank you so much, Greg. We appreciate it.
All right, Rick, I'll talk to you next week, and hopefully I'll have something to tell you about tarpon.
I'll be ready to hear it. I know you're ready for him to show up. Thank you, Greg. Talk to you next week. Now we're going to come up to West Central and check in with the main man himself, Captain Ray Markham. Ray, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How's it going there, Captain Ricky?
It's starting to warm up a little bit. The wind's backing off. Won't be long.
Yep. You know, this is a typical spring. I mean, you get a little blow that comes in for a few days. It goes away. It warms back up. We get into the 80s and the fish turn on and everybody goes nuts and heads for the boat ramp. And by the time they get out, they find the fish. You got another one rolling in. But we're getting close to the end of all this mess from the winter. But I'll tell you, fishing's been good. It's been good.
What are you catching?
Well, it depends on where you are. If you're out offshore, the guys are still catching a bunch of red grouper. They're catching some hogfish. They're catching some mangrove snapper. Most of them that I know have been running out catching kingfish because they have been coming up in droves from the south, and they're doing it to it.
I got to ask you a question. I know a little bit about how we catch kingfish on the East Coast. I've only been doing that for 50-something years. What's the go-to over there? How are the guys putting kingfish in the box?
Well, you know, things have changed to some degree because, you know, years ago we didn't have any bait boats. Shoot, you can't launch at a ramp hardly anymore. That you just start to leave, and here's this boat sitting there that's loaded down with monstrous live wells full of bait. So, but the big thing is, I mean, most of that bait is for inshore fishing, and they've got pinfish. Usually they've got scale sardines. Most of them aren't keeping thread fins because they just don't last very long in a live well, or if you're choking a well. So it's mostly pinfish and scale sardines. But if a guy really wants to go out and catch some monster kingfish, they're going to go out, they're going to look for some hard bottom, some bait schools, check it out on their recorder, and they're going to stop and they're going to sit there and jig up with sabiki rigs the baits they want. And hopefully, if they want to find good kingfish bait, they're going to be finding some blue runners. And the biggest blue runner they find, the better.
Really? You can't get a blue runner too big for a kingfish, huh?
No, are you kidding? Heck no.
Woo,
man. I know guys that they're getting blue runners that are like 3 to 4 pounds, and they're sticking them on with a double, not just a double, but a triple stinger rig, so they can get the hook to the very back of the bait, so they don't get short striped. But you know, the guys that are doing that, those are usually the guys that are tournament fishing. Mm-hmm. But if it's Joe Blow on the weekend, just wanting to go out and get a few fish for the smoker, they're trolling.
Right.
And that's the easiest thing in the world. And I grew up here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the guys that were here, they used 1 or 2 spoons. They either used a Clark spoon squid, or they used the LB Huntington drone spoons. And the go-to numero uno would be the number 3.5 silver Huntington drone spoon here.
Got it. Ray, great report. Thank you so much for it. And please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yeah, buddy. I don't think that creek's going to be rising anytime soon, but I'll be here.
I think we're in good shape. Talk to you next week.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils.
What?
Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, you know, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to his name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Our thanks to Ray Markham for a great West Central report where they are catching kingfish. Now we're going to go up into downtown Homosassa. We won't have to look very many places to find Captain William Toney. William, how are you?
Doing good. You know, just looking forward to getting back on the water again tomorrow, and just real happy about our springtime conditions. Everything's just really good here. As far as the trees are green, the blossoms are out, and the fish are biting really good.
That's outstanding. What's biting? What are they catching?
Well, right now, if you're looking for an inshore slam, it's a dealer choice. You know, snook, trout, and redfish on the inshore is really good right now. And depending on your tides, now looking up to the weekend, you know, we're going to have late afternoon kind of tides. But if you want to get ahead of the curve on tides, start out there a little bit deeper, about that 8 to 10 foot range, and catching sea trout, bluefish, Spanish mackerel, small gag grouper, and flounder out in that deeper range. So, you know, talking here on the Big Bend, 8 to 10 foot's about 8 to 10 miles offshore. So that tide is going to start showing there a little bit earlier in the afternoon here toward, you know, the weekend. And when that tide gets in the afternoon, that's when you're going to have your better luck targeting sea trout and redfish and snook pretty much at the same location if you get on the right spot.
Now, you know, you talk about the right spot. That doesn't tell anybody where William Toney's right spot is. But here's what I want to know. I was over there with you, and your area of fishing is so vast. You've got so much of an ecosystem there around Homosassa. How do guys find a school of redfish?
All right, here's an easy way to do it. Watch the shoreline. If you see one mullet jump here and there, that's no big deal. But if you see a western-facing point or a shoreline that has good water flow from the incoming tide with a multiple redfish jumping 2 or 3 at a time or one every, 10 or 15 seconds, get right over there and target that area. And one of my favorite baits to throw in there to see if it's the spot is a gold spoon.
Like a Johnson silver minnow type spoon?
Johnson silver minnow, Johnson gold spoon. I like any type, even the gator spoons. I like the Mike Hackla spoons, and also like the Epidirect gold spoons are really well in our area. But the only one that I do not like for this area is the Sprite with the treble hook,
right? Because
it says on the bottom in the small print says donor to the rock.
Yes, sir. It says very good for our business is what it says. But,
exactly.
Yeah. No,
I'm an open water bait. Yeah.
I'm a big single hook guy, and when I said Johnson silver minnow, I don't know why it's always called that, because the only color I throw it in is gold, but I still call it a Johnson silver minnow. Now, do you tip that with a rubber tail at all, William, or do you just leave it plain?
I have, but I've had just as good a luck just taking that spoon out and putting it on with a loop knot. But I'll take a small swivel and I'll put it on the D ring or the split ring on the front to keep from line twist. And there's not a lot of action involved in them, and you can cast them a country mile. Now, the best weight I prefer in our area is the quarter ounce. Anything more than that, you can't get it moving fast enough to keep it off the rocks. And a quarter ounce you can throw really well. And just throw it down that shoreline or to the point
And once it hits the water, I always tell people in my boat that are fishing with me, it's like pitching pennies. Get as close as you can to the edge without hanging up in the mangroves. And as soon as it hits the water, shut that bell, and it's just a straightforward retrieve. No jerking, no twitching, none of that. Just the spoon does its best work just by reeling it in straight and letting that flash. I think the redfish see it as a injured pinfish, and they just come up and eat it.
That's fantastic. William, that is great advice. We appreciate it as always so much. And I tell you, every one of the podcasters tonight had a little spring in their voice because it's getting to be that time. And I know we are all ready for the fish to start biting again. Buddy, I appreciate it. And please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Yep, I'll be right here in downtown Homosassa.
Captain William Toney checking in with us from downtown Homosassa. Hey, the year was 1953 when one of the true pioneers of big game fishing hung it up. It was none other than Ernest Hemingway. And listen to this. He said, "I just don't want to do it anymore. The tackle has become so sophisticated, the fish don't have a chance." Can you imagine that? Can you imagine walking him through the aisles of one of the Strike Zone fishing stores and showing him the latest and greatest from Shimano? Can you imagine handing him a Saragusa spinner that weighed less than his bait and tell him that he could put more torque on a rampaging tuna than the giant old reels of his days? No, Ernest, I'm afraid you left us a little too early. The fights with great fish still go on today, and guess what? We still sometimes get beat. Just ask Nick Stancic. But if I were a sea monster of your day, I think I'd rather do battle with you than face the tools that Shimano has stocked in the Strike Zone stores some 68 years later. Our thanks to William Toney for a great Homosassa report. Now let's head up around the bend a little bit and check in with Kevin Lanier with a Northwest Florida fishing report. Kevin, what's going on?
Hey, Captain Rick, not a whole lot other than dodging windstorms. But we're able to get out. We've gotten some pretty good results. Trigger fishing, we get those few months of the year where they actually let us keep the trigger. And we have a good time doing that. Right now it seems to be porgies and triggerfish are the ticket and releasing red snapper.
Well, releasing red snapper's always a ticket, whether we want to or not, but that's another story. But I got to ask you, I talk to people all the time about hook selection, and you need to look at the size of a fish's mouth, not the size of the fish. You can catch a big fish on a little hook, but what you got to match your hook to is the size of his mouth. Are you doing the same thing I am? We are using the littlest hooks we can get by with over here on the East Coast.
Well, Captain Rick, when primarily we're beeliner fishing this time of year anyhow, we use like a little number 4 hook. So we're getting our triggerfish on the same thing, and our porgies. I mean, small hook, small bait, that cuts down on the red snapper, and we're able to get and be productive. You put a big bait on, those triggerfish will eat it up, but they won't get the hook.
Obviously, the red snapper making it tough on all of us, but if you're looking for triggerfish and porgies, what do you look for on your bottom machine?
I'm looking for structure, and all is the key to structure. Artificial structure for us around here is the best thing.
So Rex are golden to you, huh?
Rex are golden, and Mexico Beach Artificial Reef Association is our friend here over on this side.
You've got a lot of stuff sunk offshore?
Oh, absolutely. There's over 300 reefs within 20 miles of Mexico Beach.
That is outstanding. That is absolutely outstanding. That makes life better for the fish and the fishermen. All right, Cap, listen, we sure do appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right, Captain Rick, we'll talk to you next week.
You got it. Hey, that's going to put a wrap on what has been a busy trip around the state tonight. And it's something that we're trying to do with the podcast. I want to try and help people in each region catch more fish in their region. Now, you can help us out with that a lot. And the biggest thing you can do is send us questions that you would like to know. Exactly what hook is Kevin Lanier using? How in the world is Nick Stancic finding so many swordfish? John Earhart has no trouble catching snook and Stewart. Is he fishing those mullet on the bottom, or is he live lining them? All of these questions are good, and we are going to try and answer them as you send them to us. You can either send them to Florida Sportsman on Facebook, or you can email me directly, rick@floridasportsman.com, and we'll get your question on the air. It's been a busy week. The weather's getting better, and it's only starting. I'm going to tell you, it looks like we're going to be in for a banner springtime before you know it. Hey, this podcast and every podcast we do is brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people back to nature. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You want to check out youngboats.com. I'm Captain Rick Riles, and for Florida Sportsman Magazine, we'll see you on the rip.